Let's
continue. Now in
continue.
studio is pollster and communication analyst Frank Luntz. He's been tracking voters in
HasanAbi moot Frank Luntz.
Focus groups with the New York Times throughout 2024. And
once again, I just want to repeat that, like, Frank Luntz is a right-wing pollster and is a right-wing messaging guy. So just so you understand how how right-wing American media is in general, before you say like, oh, well, as a right-wing guy, don't you think that he could have an accurate assessment of like things that are going on? He could like focus group. It's always going to have the biases, and it should ring some alarm bells, I think, for people maybe that are Democrats.
And is here with some insights on what unfolded in this historic election. So, Frank, before we get to your focus groups, you admitted quite candidly that you were wrong about something major after the election. You thought this election, if I have you right, was over after the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. What happened?
It simply wasn't. And in the end, the debate did not matter. The public is used to what Trump says. They did not hold it against him. The dogs and cats, which people made fun of, memes were created. It did not impact people because, and one of the things that we have to acknowledge is the importance of the truth. We have to tell it.
Well, that was not the truth when he said that.
No, and I thought that would kill him, but it didn't. And one of the things that really matters in elections going forward is we have the responsibility to tell them the truth, and they have the right to get the truth. And quite frankly, we are a different country today than we were even 8 years ago. What we judge people by, sometimes it's ignoring the information becomes more important than what you say. And that was the challenge with Harris.
I'm going to keep repeating the same point over and over again. As material conditions worsen, as people feel more and more anxious and more upset about their circumstances, and as no one seemingly responds to those issues, if the other side is at least like acknowledging and addressing their anger and then channeling it towards whatever avenue they see fit, they're not going to give a about the virulent racism. And sometimes they're going to actually lean into that racism. They're going to believe the racism. A lot of people will turn around and say, no, you don't understand. America's just like irredeemably racist. There's nothing we can do about it. And it's very frustrating to leave it at that.
Harris, she didn't say enough.
All right. So let's get to your focus groups. You did a series of focus groups with the young voters who were persuadable, undecided late in the summer. And then you went back right before the election after they had voted.
It's so sad that the American left constantly capitulates and supports libs to defeat the far right, and now libs are like, no, fuck leftists, we don't want them. No, I think every leftist understands that liberals are inherently antagonistic towards them. What are you talking about? What leftist is like saying, oh man, we love liberals, like there's nothing we can do? I think that the sobering examination of American politics requires you to come to terms with the reality that we have a duopoly. We have two capitalist parties that represent bourgeois interests, that represents the interests of capital, right? Represents corporate interests only above all else. And that regardless of that, your goal should be to try and force at least one of the two parties into adopting certain frameworks that you have been advocating for. If you can't get the party, the establishment of the party, to recognize that, is this not the same as economic anxiety excuse? No. The reason why it's not the same as the economic anxiety excuse is because I'm not excusing the racism. I'm very correctly calling it out every single day. My problem is when we talk about the solutions to this, okay, when we talk about the solutions to this, I always tell you one thing. You should be uncompromising in defending marginalized communities, but you should also understand where people become more vulnerable. If you don't recognize that economic volatility, economic instability, and people feeling like they have a worse future presented for them than the previous generation, they are going to be infinitely more susceptible to reactionary framing on issues. That's why I am a firm and committed advocate for Medicare for all, for example. And I always say Medicare for all means all, including Nazis, right? There is no like Medicare except the people I hate, because the goal there is to, at the very least, improve people's material conditions unconditionally so that they are less susceptible to reactionary framing. This does not mean that this will magically cause racism to perish. It doesn't mean that at all. And there will be people who fight tooth and nail every step of the way. But one, it is the right thing to do regardless, because everyone deserves a life of dignity. And two, the goal is to eliminate the underlying problems that make people more susceptible to right-wing framing in an environment where white supremacist attitudes are taken for granted. That's why Republicans can so easily point to things that are going on, like pre-existing oppressive structures, and say, that's just common sense. That's just common sense. We want more of this common sense.
Early. Let's play a little bit of the conversation we had with them. This was on Zoom. I want to play just a short clip.
How many of you, by show of hands, disliked both candidates? Do you have a negative opinion of both? It is literally every single person here. What does that say to you about American democracy, that you didn't like the Republican or the Democrat? Pierce, you go first.
I mean, I think it just shows how polarized we've become, and that, I mean, people vote based on.
Is it polarized? Honestly, I feel like, doesn't it sound like you guys are in unison, collectively decided that you're not polarized, that just like both of the parties suck and don't represent your best interest?
Their party over country, and I mean, it's unfortunate to see. I don't think we'll ever see another election in our lifetime where there's one candidate that truly wins in a Reagan landslide.
Harris ran on the platform of, I'm not Trump. And that's not enough to be a president. You need to have more than, well, I'm better than this person. You got to explain how you're going to fix our democracy, how you're going to make the United States a better place. And I didn't get that from her. And if she's saying, I'm just going to do everything the same as Biden, well, then I have concerns too, because I'm not really happy with the direction that our country is going in terms of inflation and other issues with our economy.
And that was actually the day after the election. So bottom line, what was the factor with these people that were undecided and then broke against Kamala Harris?
They did not like either candidate. That was clear. They thought that Trump was offensive and abusive in his language and polarizing. But in the end, she didn't answer the question that they wanted to know. What are you going to do in the first hour, in the first day, in the first week, the first month, and so on? They felt they had the right to hear this. And if she won't tell them that, then they couldn't give her their vote. And other voters, not just the young voters, felt that she never came clean with what she wanted to do. And the fact that she changed her positions on some issues, she never really explained it.
She talked too much about Trump.
It was too much defining what Trump was.
Not defining herself.
And John, we all know what Trump is. We experienced him for 4 years. Whoever told her to focus on him committed political malpractice. Because in the end, you cannot change someone's point of view on him. It was all about her.
Okay, there was a lot of talk about the gender gap throughout this campaign, usually focusing on how she was doing on women and Trump's problems with women. But you spent some focus groups talking with men who had voted for Hillary Clinton, they had voted for Joe Biden, and then they voted for Donald Trump.
He was their voice. In him, they saw someone who represented them, and with her, they saw, and it was great, young women getting excited for the first time, surrounded by women, talking about issues like abortion. That was great for the female vote. But men felt ignored, they felt forgotten, and they felt like they didn't even matter. And in the end, the Democratic Party has to keep both of them. It is not enough to capture the women's vote. These middle class, middle income, moderate men, I call it M cubed, they're the key to any election, and they felt betrayed by her.
Okay, so before you go, what do Democrats have to do to get competitive again?
How do you win when you lose the union vote? They had the union leadership, but not the union membership. How do you win if you lose Latinos? In fact, a majority of Latino men voted for Trump.
52%.
It's incredible how many traditional Democrats, and the reason why is that she became ideological, and what they want is simple.
Abortion was a great thing to run on, but you also need to run on issues like affecting like all the economy. Look, the campaign was cooked from the start because of Joe Biden. And Joe Biden was cooked from the start because Democrats do not highlight some of the good things that they've done. They just assume that people will figure it out on their own. That's why it was very frustrating for someone like myself, even, who is very antagonistic to the administration for a multitude of different ups that they engaged in, that like myself and maybe Majority Report were some of the few places where you actually heard about Biden administration's accomplishments. Think about that. MSNBC was far too predisposed throughout the duration of this administration with like a whole bunch of weird nonsense, I suspect, instead of genuinely highlighting some of the accomplishments of the administration. Because, yeah, secular talk as well. Like pre-October 2023, there was a lot that you could point to with respect to the accomplishments of the administration. And I certainly did in moments where they did deserve praise. But throughout the year, you're supposed to do that all the time. It can't be like the Biden's wins account, which also featured a litany of ridiculous nonsense as well. Like the Biden administration was running, at least up until a certain point, I would say maybe even before the midterms, on a anti-corporate billionaire populist strategy. They were directly antagonistic to a lot of big businesses, and yet they were too afraid of describing that. They were too afraid of showcasing that. They were too afraid of even like beefing up the vibes on that front. But ultimately, there was also a lot of stuff that they did that was really bad, really wrong. But that's besides the point anyway, because even someone like myself who is pro-labor union is still not going to overlook the fact that they ran with an incredibly right-wing anti-immigrant strategy that I am completely against, that I think was both parts bad politics and bad policy. And I said it over and over and over again from the moment that they unveiled their right-wing immigration package. Besides that point, though, there was a necessity for expanding the existing welfare state that they simply let expire in many instances, right? SNAP benefits, child tax credits, like profoundly popular expansions of the welfare state were left behind. And they never chose to punish the Republicans for it. And as a matter of fact, if you recall my early assessment, my early analysis, even during the IRA Build Back Better struggle that was happening within Congress, if you go back and watch some of my old videos from that time frame, I was so consistently yelling at the Democratic leadership for not punishing the spoilers from within. There were a lot of moments where it seemed like the Democrats were in a state of panic and in a state of disorder because Joe Manchin was fucking up the strategy. And instead of whipping those votes, instead of coming down with the strength of the state to ensure that Joe Manchin played ball. What is this? Here's you getting mad in June before the infamous debate. Biden. I hate Biden. Biden is a genocidal freak. Why am I talking about his fucking dubs and he's not? Think about that. What the are they doing? I cover the news and I have a close, I watch closely what the Democratic Party is doing and what the re-election campaign is doing. And I promise you, I have talked significantly more about this administration's W's than the administration itself. What the fuck is going on? Yeah. If you go back even further in time, during the Build Back Better conversations that were taking place, I also regularly yelled about the fact that Democrats were not whipping these votes internally. And that was making it seem like it was actually the Democrats' fault that there was gridlock, when it was always the Republicans that were universally against all of these policy accomplishments that would be helpful for every American. Republicans rarely have issues with that sort of thing, with the rare exception of like John McCain refusing to strike down Obamacare, refusing to destroy Obamacare. And it's, you know, outside of that very unique circumstance, Republicans are almost always in unison. Democrats never communicated their accomplishments throughout the year. They just never campaign year round in the way that the Republicans do. Republicans never stop campaigning. So not only are they bad across the board. Oh, here,
I hate her so much. Not only did she vote against increasing the $15 minimum wage because working.
I'm talking about Kyrsten Sinema.
But she did it in like the worst way possible. But my God, dude, like, I mean, I'll just show you. Senator Sinema voting no on the minimum wage amendment. So disrespectful, dude. Like, this is some real us girl shit. I mean, it literally feels like she was just doing it specifically so she gets this kind of backlash. Yeah, she thought it was her McCain moment. Like, all you're doing is creating more of a rift between those in the middle class, lower middle class, or maybe even like upper middle class, and people who are poor, the working poor, pitted against the middle class Americans who feel like they are not getting something out of the government that they thought that they were about to get for no reason whatsoever, because absolutely zero people were like, honestly, we really need to limit the scope of this. Like, who was making that argument? Republicans certainly weren't. Republicans are too busy talking about Mr. Potato Head's cock, okay? That's literally all Republicans have been talking about. They are so insanely hyper-focused on the culture war shit because they realize that, like, taking a stand, especially in the aftermath of the Trump administration, taking a stand against left-wing economic populism is not going to be good. You think Republicans are going to fucking go out and talk to their newly acquired base or their newly galvanized base of support and tell them, like, well, actually, we need austerity measures and we need to be a little bit more responsible because the deficit this, the deficit that. Like, no, that's not. Republicans know that they can't do that. So they talk about Mr. Potato Head's cock and they talk about Dr. Seuss. That's why they've been doing this while there's an ongoing conversation. Explain to me how it is acceptable for Democrats to just take L's over and over again because of a couple psychopaths in their own ranks that literally want to spoil a very popular policy that was the center of the Democratic National Campaign. Like, this is what Joe Biden ran on. Joe Biden ran on increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour, okay? Joe Biden and Georgia directly tied to $2,000 stimmies. What are you doing?
Just want to remind everybody that $15 minimum wage just passed in the state of Missouri. $15 minimum wage passed in the state of Missouri with a ballot measure. Now tell me, this is my analysis from March 5th, 2021, including paid sick leave too. Think about that. Missouri, on the other hand, did not vote blue. What's that about?
Actual policy goals that they run on. Republicans run on cutting taxes. They cut it. It doesn't matter. They will kill motherfuckers if they have to, but they're going to cut those taxes. Democrats don't do that. And I'm not seeing a lot of spoiler talks from the National Democratic Party currently in regards to Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin, Hasan, and all these other fucking senators and congresspersons that are operating as spoilers on a very popular policy that 60% of the country wants, even 60% of the constituents in West Virginia want, for example. So what's up? Whenever the left is playing the spoiler because they want to secure more benefits for the working class, they are lambasted. You bring out every...
You could have played this on election night. Yeah. I mean, I can just play you all my old videos. That's it. I should just do a rerun channel where I just play all my old takes on every single issue so that people understand that I've been consistent on this stuff for the longest time. And you can tell this is from a while ago because, one, I'm in my old apartment, and two, I'm fat as It wasn't just Kyrsten Sinema. It was Joe Manchin. It was Maggie Hasan. There's always like a rotating squad of villains. Bob Menendez. And the Democratic Party doesn't do anything to secure their votes. The Republican Party would never allow such a thing, okay? Yeah, and under the Obama administration, you had Joe Lieberman. But like, my point is, Democrats also personally advance the interests of these people. Harris got the endorsement of Beyonce, J-Lo, Eminem. I thought at least those celeb campaigning will move the needle a bit. No, nobody gives a shit about rich, out-of-touch people endorsing someone. The only reason why they care about the podcast route is because people have a deep and personal connection with podcasters. They have a parasocial relationship with their podcasters. And on top of that, it's not just the podcasters themselves. They get to see a humanized version of this politician that they might vote for, Donald Trump, in this circumstance. Celebrity endorsements don't have juice. They don't have motion. It don't mean shit.
Simple common sense. What they want is a meaningful, measurable change from the past. And she's talking about having no difference in her policies versus Joe Biden. The Democrats have to do this examination. And it's not about getting angry with Donald Trump. It's figuring out exactly the words, the phrase.
I'll also take it one step further. This is a quote that I saw earlier on my timeline. During the Vietnam War, every respectable artist in this country was against the war. It was like a laser beam. We were all aimed in the same direction. The power of this weapon turns out to be that of a custard pie dropped from a step ladder 6 feet high. In a sea, weren't you very dismissive about the whole Trump's going on podcast thing? No, originally when he did the Aiden Ross thing, I was. because that didn't track as like positive media overall. But the Theo Vaughn podcast was what changed my perception of everything. Because he very quickly after the Aiden Ross thing went on Theo Vaughn. And I was like, oh my God, this is getting him in front of a lot of people. And it's making him look like a human being and not like a monster. That's when I realized like this is going to be dangerous. Outside of that, however, there's two different ways of looking at the podcast bro route. There's a manosphere out there that has tremendous weight. There's like, these people are not directly in the tank for Trump in many instances, but it doesn't matter. Like the politics that they represent and the communities that they foster are inherently antagonistic towards, you know, women and a variety of different like other marginalized communities. They don't have to openly come out and be in the tank for Donald Trump to present to present an outward right-wing community and cultivate said community. And they exist in this ecosystem where they do sometimes end up cross-pollinating audiences between like people who are directly in the tank for Donald Trump, people who are directly podcasters and independent media figures that are Republican Party operatives, such as like the Daily Wire. That's also the reason why I said it would be great if Kamala Harris went on Joe Rogan, despite the fact that I don't think she would be able to present herself in the same human way that Donald Trump was able to, just, you know, even though he rambles a lot.
And you said it, not just Donald Trump winning the election, but winning the popular vote. First time in 2 decades for a Republican. And how did he do it? He did it by transforming the Republican Party. It is now more diverse than it's ever been in modern times, and certainly much more than when Donald Trump first came on the scene 8 years ago. A lot of ways to look at this. How about this here? When it says pre-Trump, that's the last presidential election.
The funniest thing that I've experienced in my career is that I've been very consistent throughout this entire process, right? And one thing that I've noticed that's pretty funny is that the early resentments that people have towards me for being right but too early still carry on, even if they come to agree with my position. I'll give you an example. I'm sure that there are a shit ton of people who are XQC fans or former XQC fans now who still despise me because I was like, kick is bad, stake is bad, cryptocurrency casino is bad, right? And it's going to poison your own content, and it's going to, slowly but surely like isolate you, alienate you, that sort of thing, right? And because of that, I got primed against like pretty fucking hard, right? Hasan and the like, people were just like spamming that all the time. That was like a huge thing on the platform. XQ was the largest. At the time, he was the largest content creator on the platform. So every time he shit on me, of course, a lot of people who love him were like, yeah, he's right. This guy sucks. So even though, ironically enough, they might now be former XQC fans who are like, yeah, the gambling stuff like really broke him or whatever, they still also despise me because the early resentment that they had towards my position, which they've now arrived at, has still carried on. And that's it. I don't even fault people for that either. It is what it is. It's so funny to have like a guy be like, I hate you, dog, and not really examine why and not really ask themselves why. Because if they were to do so, they would be like, wait a minute, I kind of agree with that assessment now. Maybe I should reconsider. You know what I mean? It is what it is. And it's not just XU. I just use them as one example. There's a million different examples of this.
Before Donald Trump started running, you got to go back to 2012 for that. Remember, 3 straight elections, Trump's been the Republican candidate. So pre-Trump, voters under 30 were...
They will say you were so right about Kamala being a turd and thought you were wrong, but now they know you were right. But I think you made those 20 million stay at home and should have shut up till the election. Yeah. People don't understand that at the time when I was making... People don't understand that at the time when I was making those criticisms, I was making them because I wanted Kamala Harris to present a stronger candidacy against Donald Trump. I wanted the Democratic Party not to be like right-wing on immigration regardless, because I think it's bad politics and bad policy. But, you know, it is what it is.
We're going for the Democrats by 23 points. Folks with incomes under 50,000, 22 points for the Democrats. Folks without college degrees, 4 points for the Democrats. That's pre-Trump. What comes out of this election? Look at some of these shifts. The youth vote, that Democratic margin cut more than in half. Voters under 50,000, now a Republican constituency. Voters without a college degree, look at that shift. Now a core Republican constituency. And then we can talk about race ethnicity. This gets into that diversity I mentioned a minute ago. Check this out. Again, pre-Trump versus now. The black vote still overwhelmingly Democratic, but that's a 15-point shift. It used to be 87 points for the Democrats, down to 72. How about this? You've heard a lot about it this week. This is what the numbers look like. Hispanic voters were 44 points Democratic before Donald Trump. Now, basically a toss-up constituency, and Asian Americans, a 32-point shift there as well. That's
one thing to also consider in these conversations is not necessarily that like people who are Asian or Hispanic went from like voting for Joe Biden to then voting for Donald Trump. And there are still plenty of people that did that for sure. But the reason why the percentages look like that is because it's not necessarily that like all of these people went from voting for Joe Biden to voting for Trump. I'm sure there were Biden and Trump voters for sure. The problem is the base overall that the Democratic Party would activate regularly within the Hispanic Latino population, within the Asian population, within the black population, they just didn't fucking vote. They didn't. They did not vote. And when they do not vote, then yeah, and the Republicans still turn out the same base, or maybe even turn some people from the Democratic Party's base. This is what happens.
What's happened to the Republican Party since Donald Trump became its standard bearer 8 years ago. This has been the movement.
It's so funny also is like, have you seen the accusations of hacking? Yes, I've seen a lot of liberals trying to cope. And in that sea of cope, they have decided to do the Republican thing and just like make stuff up. Stable Ronaldo, let's debate. Bro, you'll cook me. I'm fearful. I'm scared.